Okay, I want to welcome everyone here tonight to the next installment of the Book of Judges. We're going to be doing chapter 10 and 11 tonight. I hope, anyway. It's a long stretch, and there's a lot of verses. I may just not read all of the verses here tonight, but just trying to get through the two chapters, because it's just a good way to divide those things out. And let's begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. All righty then. Tonight we're going to be looking at the Ammonites, and you can see on our little chart over here, we're winding ourselves toward the end, and only got another 4, 5, 6 chapters to go. But so that's where we are on that, and on this chart. You'll see it right here, Jephtah. We're around 1100 BCE, and then on this chart here, it's we would be right here in this big old green block right there. All right, good enough. And so. Are there any comments or questions that you might have about what we've been looking at so far? What kind of the story that's being woven here in the Book of Judges? If there's any comments or questions there before we begin. Okay, well then let's go ahead and start the reading. Judges 10 and 1 through 5. After Abimelech, Tola, son of Puah, son of Dodo, a man of Issachar, arose to deliver Israel. He dwelt in Shamir, in the hill country of Ephraim. He judged Israel for 23 years, then died and was buried in Shamir. After him, Jair the Gileadite arose and judged Israel for 23 years. He had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys, and had 30 towns in the land of Gilead, which were called Jair's villages to this day. Then Jair died and was buried in Ammon. All right, so the words after Abimelech, where it just says, after Abimelech, it's only used here. All the other stories and episodes in Judges, it says, and Ehud died and was buried with his fathers. And then God he lifted up someone, or he got a judge or something like that, but whatever they said, that it was like so-and-so died, and then God selected another judge, and or more likely, someone died, whatever the prophet was, or the judge, died, and Israel then started chasing after the other gods and so forth of the region, and they fell into idolatry again. Then God raised up a judge and a redeemer, and that was the cycle. But this is the only place where it said, that in the chapter before, in chapter 9, it said Abimelech died, and then and that was it. He died and was buried with his fathers or whatever. But in this case, it actually mentions again that Abimelech, after Abimelech. So it's possible that the writer here just wants to reiterate that a bad chapter of Israelite history was now over with. That after Abimelech, things are going to get better. So the only thing that we know about this Tola and Jair, I say that Jair because the there is no. It starts with like a yod, and there's no J sound in the Hebrew alphabet. So it's Jair the Gileadite, and so the only thing that we know about these two guys is what we see in these few verses right here. They're not mentioned before. They're not mentioned again. So that it seemed like that they would be almost just not famous. So of course they're not famous. They were probably just judges like Deborah was, and not a warrior though. And that they had peace during that particular time frame, and so nothing really happened for that. If it was 46 years, or if they overlapped, we don't know. It doesn't really give us enough information to know whether or not they did that. But the one thing that they did talk about here, the 30 sons on 30 donkeys in 30 towns. Now that's all in Gilead. Gilead, remember, is over on the east side of the Jordan River. And in fact, here's a map that I've got of it. If you look over there on your shared screen, where we've got Jair is right here. He is from Issachar, so he would have been right around this area here. And then you've got the other one, Jair and Tola. Tola is down here in Shamir in West Manasseh. All right, so he's just above Shechem, which we talked about last week. All right, so, and what it talked about with Jair is over here in this part in Gilead, that he was from Gilead. He had 30 cities, 30 sons, 30 donkeys, and really what that probably is a reference to is that it was just during this period of time there was peace and prosperity, because he had his sons administering 30 towns, and the reference to the 30 donkeys is more of an idea of having a peace. All right, so and it is interesting here that there's no reference in this part of Judges where God raised up a judge. It was always before that God raised up a judge to save Israel, and this time no, there's no raising up of God, so of a judge by God. So, all right, let's go ahead. Any comments or questions on that? Okay, then verse 6, then Bnei Israel again did what was evil in Adonai's eyes. They worshipped the Baalim, the Ashtaroth, gods of Aram, gods of Zidon, gods of Moab, gods of the children of Ammon, and gods of the Philistines. They abandoned Adonai and did not worship him. So Adonai's anger burned against Israel, and he sold them over into the hand of the Philistines and into the hand of the children of Ammon. They shattered and crushed Bnei Israel that year. For 18 years, all Bnei Israel who were beyond the Jordan in the land of the Amorites, which is in Gilead. Then the children of Ammon also crossed over the Jordan to fight against Judah, Benjamin, and the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was greatly distressed. Now, so we have this same old tired cycle that Israel had been in this whole, for 300 years now. It's been going on. that that cycle of falling into idolatry, then being punished by whatever country, and then they cry out, and then God raises up a judge that will bring them back on the right track, redeem them, and then save them from the tyranny and the punishment that's against them. And then, so for the time that judge is alive, Israel worships God, serves God, and so we're falling into that same cycle here now, and it's a little different in this particular one, because instead of just saying that they were no longer following God and they followed the gods of Canaan or whatever, this time the description was actually all of the it talked about the various gods of the countries that that was surrounding them. So it talks about they worship the Baalim, which is the generic deities of Canaan, the Ashtaroth, and the gods of Zidon, gods of Moab, gods of children of Ammon, and gods of the Philistines. So they abandoned God. They just let it go. They didn't do anything with God. So it kind of makes me wonder, and I don't know. I'm going to have to ask our resident rabbi historian from my yeshiva how that. Okay, what did the children of Israel, what did the Levites do in Shiloh or Bethel, wherever the temple or the tabernacle was at that time? What did they do when it says Israel then fell into apostasy? Was there a remnant of the people that still followed Adonai properly? I'm sure. There probably was, and so, but I'm going to have to somehow get an answer, because I was just thinking about that this week, and I never got an answer for it. Okay, so that it's said here that God he got so mad at them, he just sold them over into the hands of the Philistines. Now, that when you sell it in, that's more like it's slavery, and so he's basically just being a whole lot more permanent with this punishment, in that, okay, I'm just going to sell you guys off, get rid of you. And so he sold them into the hand of the Philistines. And then it said they were shattered and crushed. Again, descriptors for just the intensity of what was going on against them because of their apostasy. And so then they had the Ammonites had been harassing all of the people over on the east side of the Jordan, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh were all over there on that east side. And so they were getting the brunt of it. They'd been getting that for like 18 years. But then Israel just continued in their apostasy, and the armies of Ammon then crossed over the Jordan to fight right in the very heartland of Israel, there against Judah and Benjamin. Now, you remember Benjamin was there at Jerusalem, and also with the house of Ephraim. So, and it says that Israel was greatly distressed, and I can imagine so. So now Ammon was oppressing Israel on both sides of the Jordan. And here are some pictures of some of the deities that these that were around that area If you look at this one with the bullhorns, that was from Zidon, way up there in Lebanon on the Mediterranean coast. You may know it as Sidon, Sidon. And here it's called Zidon, Zidon. Gods of Moab, they had Molech and then the gods of Ammon, they had Shoresh here, and then here the gods of I think maybe this one. Well, I can't remember if this was Sidon or what, but it was Dagon, doggone, Dagon. Now remember, in Hebrew, the word for fish is dag, D-A-G, and so this was their name for that little g god. There was Dagon. We'd say Dagon, but and then here's some little things that they found talking about the Baal and the Ashtaroth there in Canaan. Basically, their deities. Okay, just thought that would be. Oh, and this one here is Molech. Where they sacrifice babies to the fires of Molech, and then that's when God says, "You never, ever, ever, ever supposed to make your children go through the fires." So human sacrifice was just not something that God did. All right, comments, questions. All right, the chapter, verse 10. Then Bnei Israel, let me get here. Then Bnei Israel cried out to Adonai, saying, "We have sinned against you, for we have forsaken our God and worshipped the Baalim." So Adonai said to Bnei Israel, "Did I not deliver you from the Egyptians, the Amorites, the children of Ammon, the Philistines, the Zidonians, the Amalekites, the Ammonites, who oppressed you?" Then when you cried out to me, I delivered you from their hand. Yet you have forsaken me and worshipped the other gods. Therefore, I will deliver you no more. I'm done with you. He's done. He just said, "I'm done with you. Go and cry out to the gods which you have chosen. Let them deliver you in the time of your distress." So here God is just turning it right back on them and said, "Look, you guys have abandoned me. You don't want to have anything to do with me. So, go to those gods that you've been worshiping all this time and let them take care of you and rescue you from the hand of Ammon." And so he delivered. I mean, God just, he gave them this list of all of the countries, all the nations that he had delivered them from. Well, guess what? It's the same list that we saw earlier on that they were following the gods of Ammon, gods of Zidon, the Philistine gods, the Moabites, and on and on. They were following those ones that God had rescued them from. So here he is. He's done with them. He's tired of it. He says, "I want you, just go to those gods. I don't care anymore. I'm not doing anything with you." And so then Bnei Israel said to Adonai, "We have sinned. Do not do to us whatever seems good to you, but please deliver us this day." I guess they figured that God's punishment was going to be better than being oppressed by Ammon. And then they removed the foreign gods from among them and worshipped Adonai, so his soul could not bear the misery of Israel. All right. And then the children of Ammon were summoned and camped in Gilead. Bnei Israel gathered together and camped in Mizpah. The people of the princes of Gilead said one to another, "Whoever begins to fight against the children of Ammon will be chief over all the inhabitants of Gilead." All right. So the dialogue here between Bnei Israel and Adonai. it makes me wonder, okay, who is dialoguing here? Who's the one that is that's authorized to speak on behalf of all Israel? And perhaps it's the high priest in Shiloh that's doing the asking. But here Israel says, okay, you can do to us whatever pleases you, but just deliver us. We're ready to take our licks here, and yeah, it's I'm sorry, we're getting if getting a spanking will deliver us from Ammon, then so be it. Here's the belt or here's the paddle or whatever, and I'm bending over now so that you can give me a spanking. Well, God he just didn't go along with that. He just said, nope, nope, nope. So they went a little further. They said, okay, well, they took the foreign gods out from among them. That must have meant that maybe they pulled down the Asherah poles and did that sort of stuff as kind of a sign to God that, okay, we really are, we're in Teshuvah now. We're turning around. But God, he knew their hearts, and he knew the way that they were, that, okay, as soon as he delivered them, they're going to go right back to the same old stuff. And so here he is at this point saying, nah, I don't believe you. I just don't believe you at all. So there you can just imagine what he was saying there was that no matter what you do, I know your hearts. I know who you are. You're going to turn on me again. So no, I'm just not going to have anything to do with you. So then, as it turns out, then the army of Ammon then came up and they were arrayed for battle against Gilead, and on that east side of the Jordan. And so Bnei Israel gathered up together, and they camped in Mizpah. And so they're all arrayed against each other. What's interesting, though, is that these princes of Gilead, the heads of the armies of Gilead and Israel and so forth, they're saying, okay, whoever begins to fight against the children of Ammon will be chief over all the inhabitants of Gilead. Why were they saying that? Because basically they were just about to the point of doing rock, scissors, paper to try to figure out, okay, which one of you guys is going to be on the pointy end of the spear, because that's always the one that when you go into battle, it's the very sharp point of the phalanx that is going against the enemy is the one that gets beat up and they're just terribly battered. And so, okay, who's going to do that? And all the chiefs look at each other and do one of these kind of a deals that pointing to the other guy, and the whole idea is that, you talking to me? So none of them wanted to go into the battle, and that's what they can't decide who's going to be in charge. They don't want to be in charge because that meant that whoever's going to be in charge is going to be in the charge, right out there at the beginning of the charge, with his sword in hand and a target on his shield, because he's the one that they're going to all go after, the very first one. They don't want to do that. So going ahead then, now Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty man of valor, but he was the son of a prostitute, while Gilead was Jephthah's father. But Gilead bore him sons, and when the wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You won't inherit in our father's house, for you are a son of another woman." Then Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob. Some worthless fellows joined with Jephthah and went out with him. All right, now, here, this is the first mention of Jephthah the Gileadite. He said he was a mighty man of valor. Okay, so if this was written certainly after his battles with Ammon, they're going to describe him with that. Okay, before that, they he was described as well, son of a prostitute. So what does that make him? Okay, that makes him an SOB and a bastard. Okay, that's what they that's what they really were talking to him about, and said, okay, that's what you are. You're just nothing but yeah, that's exactly what it was. He was an SOB and a bastard child. Because he was not he was the son of a prostitute, then that would have made him not the son of a proper wife. Now, the idea that Gilead, they're saying Gilead, he was a Gileadite. So what does that mean? Well, Gilead was a warrior that he conquered a good bit of that land, but that was 300 years prior. This was not the same Gilead. So most probably not the same one, because we don't have any evidence that he lived that long. But then it would have probably be someone from Gilead, and he might have had the same name. We don't know, but anyway, the important thing is that, okay, this guy Gilead, whoever it was, whatever, I mean, it may not have even been his name. It was just the idea that he was from the tribe of Gilead. And so we don't know. We just know that he was not all that much of a moral person. He's going out with the ladies of the night, and one of them bore him a son. And so after this, all of Gilead's sons, legitimate sons, drove Jephthah out of the home and told him, "You got to leave. You're nothing but you're not going to inherit our land. You're not going to inherit what our father had." So then Jephthah left, and he went over into Tob. Tob means good. Well, certainly that wasn't good for Jephthah, because he at this point he turned out to be kind of like a brigand, a marauder, a bandit, a highwayman, something like that. It says that worthless fellows joined with Jephthah and went out with him. Well, that went out with him, what does that mean? It means it does not mean that they went out to the movies, they went out to go bowling, or they went out here or there. No, what this going out meant was that they were going on raids. They went to, now doesn't say anything about them raiding their own places. That would be foolish. But they could run to the east over there and go up into the area of Ammon, and okay, there it goes. And they could go in there and take what and that sort of stuff went on all the time. These bands of roving bad guys would come through, and they would steal food and whatever from the people of the region. And so here they're saying, though, that Jephthah was a mighty man of valor, but it depends on which side of the Ammonites it was. If it was before the Ammonites became such a threat, they looked at Jephthah with a lot of trepidation, disgust. They didn't like him very much. Okay, so and then when they needed him, they changed their tune. All right, so going ahead in verse 4 of chapter 11. Now it came about after a while that the children of Ammon fought with Israel. When the children of Ammon made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to fetch Jephthah from the land of Tola. They said to Jephthah, "Come and be our chief, so that we may fight the children of Ammon." And Jephthah then said to the elders of Gilead, didn't you hate me and drive me out of my father's house? So why are you now coming to me now that you know that you're in trouble? So here he turns it back on him. Jephthah he's not having any of it. He just says, "Hey, look, you're wanting me to come back over here and bail you guys out, and I'm the one that you kicked out of the house and said that I was no good SOB and I was a bastard and illegitimate, and I'm just a bad all around fellow." And so he's kind of laying it on there for them. It's just, so all you're doing is you're just wanting me to come back because you're in trouble, and the underlying theme there is that you're not going to respect me in the morning, that sort of thing. We see that Israel and Ammon had been fighting for some time. We don't really know because, it just said that they'd come against each other. And a lot of times these armies would come up against each other, and they may be there for a few, maybe a couple, 3 days, maybe a few weeks of just kind of maneuvering and try to outflanking, assessing the strengths of their enemy, and the whole time, it's the old balancing act of, well, do I show them everything how big and strong I am, or and maybe avoid the war and they decide to go home, or do we don't tell them anything so that they think they're weak and then just inviting them to come fight us? So it was always kind of a delicate balancing act when you come up against your enemy. But they would sit out there, the story of David and Goliath, the Philistines that were out there for a long time, taunting the children of the armies of Saul. And Goliath would come out there and says, "Hey, just send one guy out here and let the two of us rumble. And whoever wins, our side wins the whole thing." And so they never would do that. And then if I go on with David and Goliath, it's another story. So I'm not going to do that. These elders of Gilead offer Jephthah basically they said, "You can be our leader. You can be they don't have kings, but you can certainly be the congregation leader, and if you would just come and defeat the Ammonites." So Jephthah used this as a great opportunity, a bargaining chip, as it were. All right. So then going ahead in verse 8, "Now here's why we're turning to you," the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah. "Come with us, fight the children of Ammon, and we will become head over all the descendants of Gilead." So Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "If you take me back home to fight the children of Ammon, and Adonai gives them over to me, I should become your head." The elders said to Jephthah, "Let Adonai be witness between us, that if we don't do as you say, then Jephthah, let Adonai be the witness between the two of us. If we don't do as you say." In other words, they're just saying, "As God is my witness, we will do this." Okay, and so then Jephthah, he went to the elders of Gilead, because this other stuff had been between messengers between palace to palace there, and so now he goes directly to the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and chief over them. I think it's interesting here that he went to the elders, but the people kind of intervened and said, "No, we're going to take you, no matter what your investigation or what your negotiating and all that kind of stuff with the elders. We're going to take you. You can be our leader." And so then it said that Jephthah repeated all of his terms before Adonai at Mitzvah. All right, so what does that mean? it was one of those deals where, the Jephthah, he went there to Mizpah, and he said he repeated all these terms before Adonai. I think what's happening here, Jephthah, he's an opportunist. He's a skilled negotiator, and what he's doing is trying to legitimize his position with some kind of a ceremony, and say that, okay, yeah, I'm doing this on behalf of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and so this was at the end of the negotiation where the elders had said, yeah, come fight, and then we'll make you our ruler. Jephthah said, no, you make me the ruler, then I'll go fight. So the elders agree. The people accept Jephthah, and then he's legitimizing his position with some kind of ceremony. We don't know what it is there at Mizpah. Okay. So then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the children of Ammon, said, what have you to do with me that you have come to me to make war on my land? The king of Ammon answered the messengers of Jephthah, because Israel took away my land when they came up from Egypt, then from the Arnon to the Jabbok, as far as the Jordan. Now, therefore, return them peaceably. Now, did you notice something here? Jephthah is starting this diplomatic communiques back and forth, sending messengers back and forth. And he says, okay, now what do you have to do with me? Why are you come to make war on my land? And here's Jephthah. He's kind of acting the part of the king now, and he's saying my land. And I think it's not in the Woody Guthrie tradition of this land is your land, this land is my land. No, it's he says, what do you come to do with mine? I'm the king. I've got the property. And then the king of Ammon, children of Ammon, says, because Israel took away my land. So both of them are claiming it as a personal possession. So that doesn't look good for the negotiating table as to how that's going to all turn out. If you were a bookie, you would not want to take this one, because it looks like they're going to be going to war. All right. Now, but the king of Ammon says, just give us the land back and we will just return peaceably. No problem. And it's kind of like what's going on there today in Israel, that the what do they call it? Hezbollah and Hamas, they said, just give us all this land, move out of the occupied territories, the West Bank area, as they call it, and we won't hate you anymore. Well, that's baloney, and everybody knows it is. So anyway, they're going back and forth with these messengers, and so then Jephthah sent messengers again to the king of the children of Ammon and says, thus says Jephthah, Israel did not, and that's important right there, thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the children of Ammon. For upon departing from Egypt, Israel traveled through the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds and came to Kadesh. And then Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, please let us pass through your land. But the king of Edom would not consent. Similarly, he sent word to the king of Moab, but he would not consent. So Israel, after staying at Kadesh for a while, traveled through the wilderness around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, came up to the east side of the land of Moab, and they camped on the other side of the Arnon, but they did not enter the territory of Moab, for the Arnon was the border of Moab. All right. So looking at all of this there, Joshua then launches into this speech. It's a kind of a history speech, but it goes into the way that the Middle East was. This, what we have in the Bible, is strictly a Cliff's Notes version of what Joshua actually said, because they were really big on making long speeches, and then hopefully, by the time they got through with their long speech, whoever it was that wanted to go to war would forget what it was they wanted to go to war for. They put down, they put their weapons back in their sheaths, and then they go home. But those long speeches was a characteristic of being, in the Middle East during that part of the history of man. All right, so going ahead with where he says, okay, that's one I wanted to bring out. He says, "Thus says Jephthah." That is something that typically was reserved for for actual kings after they had been coronated, or whatever it is that you do with the king. You put a crown on his head. Okay, now everybody acknowledges he's the king. Well, and then when he's dealing with someone, he says, "Thus says the king," meaning himself. And here Jephthah is saying, "Thus says Jephthah." So he's telling this king here of Ammon that hey man, I'm the head dude around here, and this is what we're going to do, and you just have to listen up. And he again starts talking about the history of Israel, and where what had happened to them. So then verse 19, then Israel sent messengers to King Sihon. He's continuing with his narrative here. Jephthah is. Then Israel sent messengers to King Sihon of the Amorites, the kings of Heshbon, and Israel said to them, "Please let us pass through your land to my place." But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through the territory, so he gathered all his troops, camped in Jahaz, and fought against Israel. But Adonai, God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his troops into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. So Israel took possession of all that land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that country. Thus they possessed all the territory of the Amorites, from the Arnon as far as the Jabbok, and from the wilderness as far as the Jordan. So now Adonai, God of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel. So should you possess their land? What Jephthah is telling this king now, he says, hey, look, God did all of this stuff. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the one that kicked all these people out and gave us the victory and so forth. So, you do well to just back off, buckaroo. And so, he's pushing this. So now at this point, Jephthah is becoming more and more the aggressor in these negotiations, whereas he started out with, "Hey, what are you asking me?" Now he's saying that you listen to me. This is the way it actually is. And I'm behind on my notes here. Okay, so then let me get going through. Let me catch up. All right. So when Sihon was defeated in the battles, and so legitimately in the rules of war, you go up against somebody, and you win, you get their land, and so that's what they did. So Ammon had no legitimate claim to this land. Only Israel did, because God gave it to them. All right. So 24 and 28 here. Don't you possess what Chemosh, your God, gives you to possess? Let me find it on this thing. Likewise, whatever Adonai our God has dispossessed from before us, that this we will possess. Besides, are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did you ever strive against Israel, or did you fight against them? While Israel was living in Heshbon and its villages in Aroer and its villages and all the cities on both sides of the Arnon for 300 years. Why didn't you try to recover them all that time? So I myself have not transgressed against you, yet you are doing me harm by waging war against me. May Adonai the judge today between Bnei Israel and the children of Ammon. However, the king of the children of Ammon paid no attention to the words of Jephthah and that he had sent them. All right, negotiations are broken down. Jephthah gets up there and he says, "Hey, don't you have what your God is giving you out there? I mean, your God, he's giving you all this stuff. So why don't you just, that's your stuff." And just this is a map over here that if you look at the shared thing, that kind of gives you an idea of where Ammon is in this area. Okay. What is it? Ammon, there's a place now called Amman, Jordan. That's what we're looking at here. All right. And Moab. So when the Israelites had come up, they couldn't go through Edom or Moab or the Ammonites stuff. So what they do, they went around the bottom of Edom, around the side of Moab, and on up then toward the promised land. And then they get up here to Sihon, and he wouldn't let them come through. He just wasn't going to do it. And so he put up his armies against them. Israel, through the hand of God, won the victory, and then took the land. So Jephthah's just telling him, he says, "Hey, look, this stuff was done a long time ago, 300 years ago." And he says, and plus, he says, "Are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, the king of Moab?" Said, he didn't beat us. He didn't never really even put up any kind of much of a fight. And plus, he said, that was 300 years ago, dude. Why are you after me now to try to recover all this stuff? The warranty has run out. That was 300 years ago. And he said, plus, I myself, I haven't transgressed against you. I was here, I was minding my own business, not bothering you at all. And yet you have come into my land and waging war against me. So, may Adonai the judge between you and between Bnei Israel and the children of Ammon. At that point, then the war has pretty much become inevitable. That Israel had taken this stuff 300 years ago, and now after 300 years, Ammon wants the land back. Well, that's kind of crazy. It's kind of like some of these lawsuits nowadays where, for whatever reason, the U.S. government has either they've abrogated treaties that they had with the Native Americans here, and now the Native Americans said, okay, we want this land back. 150 years later, when they were when they had the land, they never actually possessed it because they were nomads and they just traveled around. But for them to come back and says, okay, now we want this land. Same thing's going on in Australia with the indigenous people down there. That they're coming in and says, oh, we want this land. And when we were here, it was a swamp. When our ancestors had it, it was a swamp. And now you filled it all in. And you got these big old skyscrapers here and all that kind of stuff. And you call it Sydney. Well, we want Sydney. That's our land, and we want it back. Well, it's ludicrous. It just wouldn't work. So basically, negotiation broke down. war became inevitable. So let's go. Then the Ruach Adonai, the Spirit of God, came upon Jephthah, so that he marched through Gilead, Manasseh, and passed through the Mizpah of Gilead. And from Mizpah of Gilead, he crossed over to the children of Ammon. Then Jephthah vowed a vow to Adonai and said, if you will indeed give me the children of Ammon in my hand, then it will be whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me. When I return safely from the children of Ammon, it will be Adonai's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. So Jephthah crossed over to the children of Ammon to fight against them, and Adonai gave them into his hand, so that he utterly defeated them from Aroer until you come to Minnith, 20 towns, and as far as Abel Karamim, so that the children of Ammon were subdued before Adonai. All right. Here's a map. Kind of shows. Now this is a lot. This is also gets into chapter 12. So I'll bring it up again next week. So anyway, here's this map that kind of gives you an idea of where we're talking about, what the various places are, and some of those. The places they really don't know. You know, it's the best educated guess as to where they are. All right, so it just said that Jephthah, he just marched right on through where he needed to go. He went through to Mizpah, and then on down to where the Ammonite armies were. And he beat them through God's help. But what he did was he did do something that's very, very rash, really stupid. He made a vow to God. That is not stupid. Okay, you can make a vow to God to do whatever. But at this point, he made this vow to God and says, whatever comes outdoors from my house when I get back home, I'll sacrifice it. I don't know what in the heck he was thinking about. So what would possibly come out of his house except a person? I know that they would have maybe a sheep or a lamb or something like that in the lower section of their house, but they would be pretty well corralled. So I don't know what he was thinking about. Of whatever comes through that door, that's what I'm going to sacrifice it. So anyway, the story leaves off right there. Jephthah crosses over Jordan, and they fight the Ammonites, and they win. Okay, and so now when Jephthah arrived at his home in Mizpah, behold, his daughter was coming out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. Now she was his only child. Besides her, he had no son or daughter. Upon seeing her, he tore his clothes and said, alas, my daughter, you made me bow down in grief. You've made me miserable. It kind of sounds like he's blaming her for his stupidity. For I have opened my mouth to Adonai, and I cannot take it back. And she says, my father, you have opened your mouth to Adonai. Do to me what proceeded from your mouth, since Adonai brought vengeance on your enemies, the children of Ammon. Okay, incredible woman here, or girl, actually. It probably would have been a girl because she was not married yet. So early teenager, maybe, something like that. And here she says, yeah, okay, you made a vow, and vow made is a vow paid. You know, you got to go out there and do what you said that you're gonna do. And Jephthah gets up there, he sees what has happened, and it just overcome. He rips his clothes. Of course, that's the universal sign in Israel of grief, anguish, and distress. And so he's telling him, so look, I made a vow. Now I have to keep it. And so his daughter agreed with him. Which, says, okay, said, you're going to, what? Okay, you're going to sacrifice me. That means cutting the throat. And so it would have had to have been, if that's the case, then it would have had to have been on a pagan altar, not an altar to God, because God would not accept a human sacrifice on his altars. It would have defiled the altar. So anyway, are there any comments or questions? I mean, this is one that's kind of strange here, because if you got a comment or question, please jump in there.
Hey,
go ahead, Ron. Yeah,
hey,
I can hear you.
When it came to Jephthah's the vow that he made, now and you help me out, you tell me, because human sacrifice, the Lord absolutely did not want to receive anything like that. But as I have read and studied over the years, it seems that some theologians have asserted that perhaps his daughter basically put herself toward, I guess, the temple service of some kind. But that she did something to the point where she never married, and so she basically, gave herself over to the Lord as some type of, service to the. I'm not sure exactly if it's a temple or not the temple, to the tabernacle maybe. I'm not sure, but I was wondering what you thought happened to her, because I know she had some time to get ready, so to speak.
Okay, yeah. Now that is something, because now I have read that very same thing, and I've got 2 or 3 reference books that I was going by tonight, and both of these guys here say that no, he sacrificed her on some kind of an altar. He made her into a burnt offering. And, that just goes against our old Western grain so much that you wonder then, okay, we would hope, we really would like to have a happy ending here. That somehow or another that she would escape this idea of being a crispy critter, because we just don't think that in our terms a man cannot sacrifice his teenage girl. Even though everyone knows that teenage girls can be quite a handful, you're certainly not going to sacrifice them. You might think about it a minute, but just remember that grandchildren are God's reward for not killing your teenage kids. Okay, so there is that. There are theologians. Delitzsch is one of them that he translated he's a translator, and he's one that says no, that there is a way, because when you're making a vow, like the Nazarite vows, okay, when you're making a vow of some sort or any kind of a vow, and you make your vow on a person's life, then what you can do is redeem that person with a fee. And there was a set fee that was depending on, I say a set fee. There was a fee that depended on your own financial status. If you were very wealthy, would be a little bit higher fee. If you were very, very poor, very low fee. But you could redeem your son. I mean, the idea of redeeming your firstborn is also related to that, where when they reach bar mitzvah age, you bring an equivalent amount of money that equivalent to one of the I'd have to look it up in the temple shekels and so forth, how much it would be. But some people actually still do that today. They will redeem the firstborn. They will bring a number of silver coins to the rabbi, and he accepts the things in his hand. He prays with the child, basically doing a blessing for the young man. And then he takes that money and gives it back to the family and says, okay, the Lord has the cattle on 1,000 hills. He's got enough scratch right now. just go ahead and take this money and put it toward your son's education. And there were ways that you could do that, and so that's what they're trying to stretch on. I don't know. Textually, there's no there's nothing in the text that said that they could do that. And in this particular text, there are other things, like I just said, that in redeeming the firstborn and in vows, where they could have done that. I personally would like to think that that's what they did, because I like happy endings, and I don't like it when the girl dies in the end. Okay, I just don't like that. So that's the best I know how to do that, because I know some people will say, no, he sacrificed her. And I believe that he probably could have, because remember, this guy's only this far away from being a pagan himself. He used the name of God, but he was still a stinker in his own right. And go ahead.
But let me ask you this. So we know that when Abraham took Isaac up, Adonai stayed his hand because he didn't want, of course, a human sacrifice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no other place that I know of in Scripture where there was a human sacrifice made to Adonai. Now, I mean, of course, there's plenty of pagans, but a couple of verses back it says that the Ruach Adonai fell upon Jephthah. So surely he wouldn't go from there to sacrifice to a pagan that soon. And so my thought, and I'm just speaking out loud as I'm driving here. Would this not be similar to what Hannah did with Samuel by dedicating him back to the Lord?
But no, that was from the very beginning. It could very well be, and I would hope that it would be. But when Hannah was making her plea to the Lord, she said, "Look, that if you would just give me a son, I will give him to you for your service." Now, she was not giving him to be a sacrifice. She was giving him over to be full 100% service to the Lord. And that was the deal right from the very beginning, is a deal like that. Okay. So, they're similar, but I don't think they're, there's too many differences to say that they're the same.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm like you. I just cannot consider that he would actually, or even that Adonai would even receive a human sacrifice, no matter, even though he vowed it, which was crazy.
Oh, he wouldn't have. It would not have. The Lord would not have accepted that. I mean, so he could have killed her, but the Lord was not going to accept that. So she would have died in vain. Is what the way I would look at that.